Before I start the video, as a quick reminder, check out my links down below to help support the channel. I am now in partnership with Baron of Dice. They have some awesome TCG accessories like playmats, deck boxes, and dice. And if you want to level up your setup, it is the perfect way to do so. And if you want to support the channel directly and get some sweet perks, consider joining the Patreon. If you want to get early access to videos or even some deck help, Patreon is where it's at. And so without further ado, let's get back into the video. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin with Jurassic Magic, and here I am in Canada right now. I'm finishing up an Alaskan cruise, and it's been a wonderful time seeing all sorts of things in nature, like wild animals, and it's been breathtaking essentially. So today I wanted to do a deck tech around Lumra, Bellow because in Alaska there's a lot of grizzly bears, and bears are one of the most fascinating creatures, at least in my opinion. And Lumra is a commander that I overlooked with Bloomborough spoiler season happening. It's basically a splendid reclamation on a body along with milling cards. It's a very powerful commander. You can go a little bit of a Voltron style with it, having a lot of lands on the battlefield and swinging in and connecting with people. Plus it's a really cool bear. And so today's deck tech, I'm going to go over a couple of different things with Lumra. First, I'm going to go over a Lands Matters theme. I'm also going to focus on a little bit of a Voltron theme and how we're going to win. And so with that said, let's get it started and get into this video. So of course we want to go first into landfall synergies. We want to put lands into the graveyard so that we can put them back onto the battlefield with Lumra. So if we do want some bursts of mana, I do like Lotus Cobra, Tideless Provisioner, as well as Nissa. Each of these are perfect because when a land enters the battlefield, we get an extra mana whether it's floating in the air or it's in the form of treasure with Tideless Provisioner. I also think one-off effects like Entish Restoration, Roiling Regrowth, or even Harrow is a perfect option in this type of list because we want to sacrifice lands, get more lands on the battlefield, and then return those lands we sacrifice onto the battlefield with Lumra or other means. Other prime examples of getting lands into our graveyard are Aftermath Analyst as well as Six. Aftermath Analyst is great when it enters, you mill 3 cards. That's pretty good. If you get all lands into the graveyard, that's perfect. And it's also a redundant effect of Lumra if we want to get it in the early game, or if we have Lumra have a huge commander tax, because let's be real, it's going to be a threat. Also, Six is pretty powerful too in this list. When it attacks, you mill 3 cards. You may put a land card from among them into your hand. You don't have to choose it. It's a May ability, so you can just put all lands in the graveyard, and as long as it's your turn, non-land permanent cards in your graveyard have Retrace, so you can cast something from the graveyard with an additional cost of discarding a land and paying their cost too. But if you want to get a stupid amount of lands onto the battlefield, Traverse the Outlands is going to be a very high ceiling card. You search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. If Lumra is like a 5/5, you're going to get 5 additional lands onto the battlefield. If Lumra is like a 10/10, you're just going to put 10 lands onto the battlefield, and it really does scale with the game. And something to know about Lumra's ability is the fact that the lands are going to enter tapped. Most of the ramp spells we have in this deck are going to have lands enter the battlefield tapped, so we might want to utilize some cards like Amulet of Vigor, Tiller Engine, or Spelunking. So this way, instead of those lands entering tapped, they will enter untapped, and we have a huge burst of mana from all the lands we return to the battlefield with. Another great card that'll help us get lands into the graveyard is Blossoming Tortoise. I love this card so much. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you mill 3 cards and then return a land card from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And the other abilities kind of will be relevant if you have like an Ashaya on the battlefield, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. You may also want to consider Crucible World effects, because there's going to be a decent amount of fetch lands in this deck. I just absolutely love the synergy of sacrificing a land, searching your library for another land, and then you can play that land you sacrifice from your graveyard to the battlefield and repeat over and over again. And if you have ways of playing additional lands on your turn, like Oracle of Baldaya, or even the new Ice Toll Explorer, you're really going to go ham. And speaking of Ice Toll Explorer, this is probably one of the best cards in this deck by far. This does everything you want. You play additional lands on each of your turns. It's a Crucible Worlds effect. You may play lands from your graveyard, and most of all, it has that landfall ability. Whatever land you control enters, you mill a card. Milling cards into our graveyard, especially with Lumra in the command zone, is going to be absolutely brutal. And because we're putting a lot of lands into our graveyard and reanimating them with Lumra, he's going to have huge power, so you may want to consider effects that will draw you equal to the power of a specific creature, specifically ones that will sacrifice the specific creature to draw a bunch of cards. And what I mean by that is by using Momentous Fall or even Life's Legacy. You sacrifice the creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, and of course if we have a lot of lands on the battlefield, we're going to draw an insane amount of cards, and most likely we'll have to go to our discard step and discard a bunch of lands. So on the next turn we just cast Lumra again, and most likely we'll have the mana because of course we're a landfall deck. Getting that effect over and over again will ensure victory, and of course, if you want a reusable effect, you may want to consider Greater Good. One of my favorite draw engines in Commander. You sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, then discard 3 cards. So look at that, we could discard 3 cards, like the lands you could draw. So that way when you recast Lumra, you can just put those lands from the graveyard to the battlefield. And again, there's a lot of these type of effects. You may want to consider sacrificing Lumra a couple of times to get that value of getting him into the command zone and then recasting him. Eldritch Evolution will get you a creature with mana value 2 plus the sacrificed creature's mana value or less, so you can get a really powerful creature at CMC 8 or less, which could help close out the game. Alright, so now that I've talked about Landfall, let's talk about something different and talk about Voltron. So there's a specific reason why I wanted to dive into this subject specifically, and that's the fact that Lumra is going to get absolutely massive the more lands you have, the bigger he is going to become. So you may want to include effects that give him trample, like Luxodon Warhammer. Equipped creature gets +3/+0 and trample and lifelink. Getting that lifelink is absolutely brutal. You swing in with him, and the fact that he has vigilance and reach means that he can swing in, he won't be tapped, and he can stay behind on your opponent's turn and block big giant scary threats like dragons too. And it can become handy, especially with lifelink, if they try to swing in with you. Well, you're just going to gain that much life dealing damage to that creature, so it's going to be a win-win. The same can be applied for Shadow Spear, but this could be a little bit better in some situations. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has trample and lifelink like Luxodon Warhammer. However, it has an additional ability of permits your opponent's control lose hexproof and indestructible until on turn. That's very good, clean and simple. But you could also basically give your commander unblockable with cards like Trailblazer's Boots or even Commander's Plate. Non-basic Landwalk is perfect, especially against people nowadays who just run non-basics all over the place. We could just go right in for the kill and not having to worry about anybody blocking us. And of course with Commander's Plate, I think it's a little better, especially in this scenario. Giving your commander protection from everything besides green is absolutely insane. Swords to Plowshares or even like Deadly Rollick, any of those kind of one-off spells won't target Lumra, as well as people blocking Lumra. If they don't have a green creature, will say goodbye to their life total. But another way to go into that Voltron strategy is by doubling the power and toughness of each creature you control. You don't have to just limit it to your commander. So something like Unnatural Growth or Zapendra Hunger Dominus can double the power and toughness of each creature you control, which is absolutely monumental. This will help ensure that you could swing it for a huge amount of damage, and if they do have trample, that most likely is going to spell good game for your opponents. And that does include the new Might Form Harmonizer. This is absolutely insane in this type of deck. Whenever a land you control enters, double the power of target creature you control until on a turn. This is pretty intense with Lumra. Let's just say Might Form Harvester is on the battlefield with a couple of creatures and you cast Lumra, return all your lands from the graveyard to the battlefield, and hypothetically, let's just say 5 of them return. That means you'll get 5 triggers of doubling the power of target creature you control. You could spread the love, double each creature, or you could stack it all into one creature, and if it has trample, most likely it's going to be a good game for that opponent, because when you double and double and double and double and double again, the more you're going to stack into a huge amount of damage. Alright, so now that I've talked about a little bit of a Voltron theme, let's go over some win cons. If you do want a clean big mana combo, you could utilize Cultivator Colossus and Abundance. The way this usually works is you have a couple lands in your hand and Abundance on the battlefield. You cast Cultivator Colossus. Every time you draw the card, you choose a land and reveal the top card of your library until you reveal a land card, and you put it into your hand. And this is a replacement effect that will allow Cultivator Colossus to constantly get lands into your hand and put them onto the battlefield and pull all the lands from your deck just straight up on there. And if you have a lot of cards that have landfall triggers on the battlefield, most likely you'll spell in good game for your opponents. One other disgusting combo that you can put in the deck is Ice Till Explorer, Spring Heart Nantuko, and one creature that adds a mana whenever a land enters the battlefield. So let's just say, for example, Lotus Cobra. So what you'll do is attach Spring Heart Nantuko to Ice Till Explorer, and what will happen is a chain reaction when you play a land. A couple of triggers will happen. Lotus Cobra will trigger adding 1 mana of any color, Ice Till Explorer will mill a card into the graveyard, and Spring Heart Nantuko will have that trigger ability go off by paying 2 mana, and if you do pay that 2 mana, you get to make a copy of Ice Till Explorer. And if that one land you were playing was a fetch land, you can essentially keep on making that loop because you're making a new Ice Till Explorer each time, and you can play additional land. You make more landfall triggers with Lotus Cobra, make more copies of Ice Till Explorer, and what will result is basically your whole entire library milled because of the amount of Ice Till Explorers you have, along with all the lands you fetched on the battlefield or other lands in your graveyard. And if you have a lot of landfall triggers outside of that, or with your commander, you could find a win from there. So that is one combo that you could utilize in the deck. Of course, there's a lot of things that you could do because it's a landfall deck. Landfall is all about getting value, and of course with Lumra, Bellow of the Woods, it makes the deck even more insane when you put those lands into your graveyard and animating them. Alright, that is going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Lumra, Bellow of the Woods. This is one nasty commander and one that scares a lot of different opponents. You don't necessarily want to remove it because, okay, I get to recast Lumra and put a lot of lands onto the battlefield again over and over again, so that is a cautionary tale for sure. So let me know down below in the comments, what do you think of Lumra? Do you actually play it yourself? What are some tips and secrets that you found yourself while playing Lumra that you'd like to share with everybody else? So with all that said, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.